Since I've been involved in the tattooing world, I've seen such immense changes. It's really unbelievable.
This sort of story of, tattooing always being new, I think is sort of less interesting than actually what is really happening, which is that tattooing kind of, mirrors or works in tandem with kind of just broader trends in visual culture.
From what I've heard with speaking to people who've been tattooing for longer, I think it's definitely changed into something that's more of a fashion. So I think you'll see, although there's always been trends, like things that are popular of their time, I think that will I think it'll dissipate for a while and then it will go back to as it was.
I've always been interested in tattooing from a very early age. To me, it just seemed like the ultimate commitment to a creative identity. Because of this curiosity, I wanted to know how the process and perception of tattoos have changed from inside the industry.
My name's Lara Hardy. I'm a tattoo artist of 40 years and I work in Muswell Hill in North London. I got into tattooing in an interest in it in the mid-1970s when there was a big teddy boy revival in England, or in Britain in fact, and lots of the old teddy boys had tattoos. I really liked the clothing, the draped jackets, the sort of creeper shoes, drainpipe trousers. I was really into the music, and I guess subconsciously seeing these guys with their tattoos inspired me a bit to get them done myself.
Although tattoos are becoming more accepted the world over, there are some artists like Lau who think there should be limitations.
When I first started tattooing, you never saw people with facial tattooing, and we would never do facial tattooing in the shop, and I still won't tattoo people's faces. We did used to charge double the price for neck and hands because we felt that if somebody really wanted it, they'd commit to paying the money to have it done. I still am not a great advocate of people getting hands and necks done. Very visible tattoos, especially if they're young and if it's their first tattoos that they're getting. I mean, at the moment it's very, very popular. You see lots of young people with their throats tattooed and their hands, but I've been in the business over 40 years and things change and times change, and whilst there's an acceptability for it, I do think you might find a little bit of a backlash in the future. So for me, unless the person is heavily tattooed, I choose not to really tattoo neck or hands. Some people say that trends in tattooing are secular. I don't know if that's strictly true. Maybe for some designs that have got an aesthetic that is endearing to many people. We do find on the secular type of thing, I think that people are referring more to the traditional old tattoo designs that, done with a bold line, quite a bit of black in them. They're going to last forever. They're the tattoos that your grandfather had. Tattoos are only around as long as the person wearing them. So, you could get a tattoo done today, walk outside, get run over. And it doesn't mean that all of us are going to live forever and our tattoos are going to age, or that, they are, for a lot of people, done for the moment. I mean, my granddad was 97 years old when he died. He had a tattoo when he was 12, and you could still see what it said. It was just two initials, JS. His name was Jack Shepherd, but he had it when he was 12 years old. He was 97 when he died. You could still make out the initials, That's the nature of old school. They say bold will hold.
As a veteran tattoo artist, Lau has seen the industry change. I wanted to know how we got where we are today, so I went to talk to someone who could help me delve deeper into tattoo history.
No one wants their dad's tattoos, right? Like no one wants their dad's haircut, no one wants their dad's car, but everyone wants their granddad's tattoos, right? And everyone wants their granddad's clothes. It's a sort of cycle in fashion history, and a cycle in kind of histories of taste, and a cycle in histories of aesthetic, sensibility that really work on a particular kind of time frame. Hi, I'm Dr. Matt Lodder. I am a senior lecturer in art history and American studies at the University of Essex. My primary research is on the history of British tattooing, basically from the early modern period to the present day, so about 1600 to now. And I guess my kind of original take on this material is to try and use the tool sets of art history and use those kind of academic scholarly tool sets to think about tattooing, to the ways in which other art historians think about things like painting and sculpture and photography, because tattooing has mainly been thought about historically through the lens of things like criminology and anthropology, sociology. Why do people get tattooed? this whole kind of image world of tattooing. Who makes these images, what their contexts are, what they tell us about the people that make them and the places they come from. Like that whole kind of way of thinking about tattooing has been slightly forgotten about.
Matt is one of the curators of a show that is currently travelling the country called British Tattoo Art Revealed. I visited the exhibition last year and was overwhelmed by the amount of things I didn't know about tattooing.
Putting the exhibition together was really good fun because I think, you know, tattoo history, I mean, like all kind of popular culture history, has not been particularly well served by institutions, right? So until very, very recently, museums in general haven't been interested in keeping things that were, you know, from everyday people. They'd collect things from, you know, silverware from princes and kings, but things that normal people used were not a priority. And what that's meant is that the material that's needed to kind of tell a history of tattooing properly, a huge amount of it is in private collections. It's not really stuff that's been collected by big institutional collections. It's stuff that, you know, tattooist families have kept and preserved and looked after, you know, on their own, out of a sort of, you know, out of a love and a deep sort of commitment to this practice, rather than any kind of, you know, preservation or archival instinct.
Years ago, there used to be a museum in London called the Museum of Mankind. It was aligned to the British Museum, and I went to an exhibition there on the Amazon where they'd recreated an Amazon longhouse. It was fantastic, and I got an interview with the curator there and suggested that it would be good if they did a tattoo exhibition. This was years and years ago. Anyway, nothing came of it. Then there was a Maori exhibition, and of course the tattooed heads, the mocoed heads, it's a very controversial subject. And I had some fake ones that have been made, but they were really realistic, and I offered to lend it to them. So, you know, in all good faith, thinking that it's better to illustrate what actually went on in humankind, but rather than putting the real heads there, you could have these. The woman curator was so rude to me, it was just unbelievable. So I just thought the museum world is definitely not interested in tattooing. The National Maritime Museum in Falmouth approached me to be involved with this history of British tattooing exhibition, which really has proved to be quite groundbreaking because it's travelled around the country. It's had loads of visitors. It's amazing really that they managed to get such a great collection of, you know, items together from different collections, different museums, from Edison pens to dental pluggers to Jerusalem Cross, the Bodmin Jail book, the Jesse Knight collection. So I felt very proud to be involved in that. Whether we will ever see a museum take a permanent exhibit, I don't know.
It was really important to me, and that we got to show a kind of side of tattoo history that wasn't visible in other formats. We wanted to do something that wasn't prurient or voyeuristic, so when occasionally tattoo history comes up in other, has come up in other places, it's very kind of put through the lens of like criminology and subculture. And I feel there's a lot of that in my exhibition, but it's a lot more than that. So we wanted to tell those stories. We wanted to also kind of ensure again that this like chronology was preserved, so you can walk through and see this unbroken history. So it was a real, you know, thrill and opportunity and honour in a way to be able to work with private collectors who've been, you know, in the cases that I was working with, looking after and, you know, being custodians of tattoo history for 40, 50 years, and taking stuff that they really kind of, you know, hold dear but that doesn't see the light of day, and really put it on display to tell this story more richly.
Unlike a lot of exhibits, British Tattoo Art Revealed doesn't focus on one particular style or time. The show is chronological in an effort to not only show the growth and change in the industry, but also Matt hopes to dispel some of the misconceptions around the medium.
To start with, this idea that there is a particular kind of past where only a certain type of person got tattoos is like completely, you know, untrue. Tattooing has always been, you know, skewed slightly male, skewed slightly lower middle class, let's say, or working class, but with you know always a prevalence of women getting tattooed, always a prevalence of like, you know, rich people getting tattooed. And if you think about the professional era, this era that I'm really interested in, where we have tattoo shops and places where you kind of, as a regular person on the street, go and pay money to get a tattoo. Like, that has always been probably more skewed towards the more middle class, the more kind of mainstream end of things in a weird way, right? Because that kind of practice relies on an economy to work. The tattoo shops began to exist in the late 19th century because there was a client base with money who wanted to get tattoos, right? That's what made tattooing a viable profession.
I'm not really sure what the misconceptions are now, because they're in abundance everywhere, tattooing. As we said, for all different ages, all different groups of people. I mean, years ago it was perceived as just being for sort of dockers, labourers, bad boys, sailors. That's out the window now. Every old book you looked at, it says once the preserve of navvies, sailors, military. Now everyone gets it done. From my own personal point of view within the tattoo world, there's not too many misconceptions now. Years ago, definitely you were judged by your tattoos. There's a saying in the tattoo world that years ago, if you had tattoos on your hands and neck, you was a bad boy. Now you're going to read a poem about your vegan bicycle, which is kind of, although it sounds trite, it's actually saying that it's not got that bad boy image to it anymore.
As the media becomes more and more saturated with images of tattoos, there's loads more TV shows and conventions for the public to see. But do they really help tattooing's image?
When people talk about reality shows, it's kind of a double-edged sword for the tattoo world, because when Miami Ink came out, I don't think anyone could believe that there was a networked program about a tattoo studio. Initially, I have to say, some of the artists on there were very influential, and certainly some of the tattoos that people got. I mean, Army James did a koi on a guy, and we were inundated with people wanting kois done, So the reality shows played an important part in keeping the trade alive, but they also reached saturation point. I think with some of them, the storylines became so absolutely ridiculous that it was frustrating within the tattoo world that they weren't making something A, that was either historical, or B, that was educational. And there's so many of them now on different sort of levels. Some of them I think are quite questionable, to be honest with you, and I've got friends that are on them, and they will argue a good argument as to why they feel it's valid that they're on there. But for somebody who's in the tattoo world, I've been involved in it in very formative parts of it. I've written books on it, been involved in numerous articles, TV, film, museums, educational things, and I kind of feel quite sad to see it belittled in some ways and to just become, car crash TV.
Jade and her husband took over Jurassic Coast Tattoo Convention in Bournemouth 3 years ago to keep the fun community atmosphere they knew from tattooing going.
The aspect of this convention is definitely about socialising, making friends and bringing back a friendship kind of dynamic to the tattoo industry. It's a very divided industry. We want people to support the artists that come here instead of making it about going to see the acts. So whereas some might want to see that sort of thing, they can go to London, or if they want to just hang out with their pals and make new pals and just make some really cool friendships, they can come to ours. Do I think it's important to have conventions? That's a really tricky one, because like conventions and like tattoo studios, they start becoming oversaturated and it's hard to tell the good ones from the bad ones. And maybe by coming to these sort of conventions, which have got a lot of the Bournemouth studios here, you can then see the good work that is expected, and it gives people the opportunity to have a look at what's in their local area. Getting a sleeve tattoo is still seen as quite normal, whereas facial tattoos, that's when it takes it to the extreme, but what's normal for me is not normal for someone else. So personally, I don't think it's seen as a disadvantage or a reason why not to get a job, because you made that choice. you've made that choice to mark your body. It's not like a disability where you don't have the choice. So this whole tattoos in the workplace stuff kind of is a bit iffy for me, because you've chosen to get your face tattooed, you might not become employable. So definitely get people to think about their future prospects before they get visible tattoos.
Conventions showed me that there was this big, welcoming society of tattooers. So I wanted to talk to some of the people that haven't been in the industry all that long and see why they were drawn to it as a profession. The girls at Blue Tattoo in Hammersmith had a chat with me.
Hi, my name's Lara and I've been tattooing for 3 years. My friend Dan said that he thought that I would enjoy it, and I did.
I'm Leti Mortimer. I've been tattooing for 2 years. I got into tattooing through doing an apprenticeship, which was 2.5 years. Got very lucky with my apprenticeship. I found, after going around various tattoo shops with my portfolio, I found Rose Harley. When I was growing up, I grew up in quite rural Suffolk, where tattoos weren't really popular, or was kind of frowned on. In terms of people that I saw who had tattoos, it was all in like magazines, like cool bands and like artists, and yeah, people who I just thought looked super cool, and went and got one of my own when I was 18. In terms of style, the way I was taught was to not specialise too early, and yeah, so I think I'm definitely still sort of finding my feet. So anything that comes my way, I'll just do sort of to the best of my ability. Yeah, I just really enjoy tattooing, so it's whatever I get, I'm happy to do.
I like to keep it as broad as possible, really. I've not been tattooing for very long, so I think the more that you keep it broad, the more that you can learn and then apply that to other things that you do. So from what I've heard with speaking to people who've been tattooing for longer, I think it's definitely changed into something that's more of a fashion. So I think you'll see, although there's always been trends, like things that are popular of their time, I think that will I think it'll dissipate for a while and then it will go back to as it was.
What I've learned through talking to all these people, whether they're tattooed, tattoo other people, or just as interested in them as me, is that if they love tattoos, they really love tattoos. So if you have one or not, I'd encourage you to learn a little bit about the people and the history behind these inky works of art.
I got my first tattoo done, and I've never forgotten the date, momentous day. It was February the 8th, 1976. I had it done at a little tattoo studio in Wood Green in London. In Borneo, I remember it was a big storm outside. I was in this little sort of hut place with a fan going and getting the back of my leg tattooed and that. So it's actually everything that goes with that, making the journey there, meeting the people that do it. You know, it's very interesting. And yeah, I always say that I kind of think in the diary of life, my tattoos are just inky memories.